Thank you very much. So this morning, please welcome Ms. Sophia Sunwoo.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. So when I was 19 years old, I started a clothing company that I would end up selling before my 23rd birthday. And when I was 24, I would go on to build a clean water nonprofit that would serve 76,000 people in West Africa. Today, I'm here to tell you how I, someone with absolutely no experience, ended up building 2 successful startups before she turned 29, and why I hope my journey will intertwine with yours one day. When I was 19, my college roommate and I decided to start a clothing company together. We both loved going to concerts and seeing our favorite bands play, but what we didn't love is all the baggy unisex band t-shirts that they would sell at these concerts. We wanted to look good and express our love for music while doing it. And this was really speaking to a long-held dream of mine. Ever since I was a little girl, I really wanted to be a clothing designer. I would draw all these sketches of my future clothing line that had tops, accessories, shoes, and flared jeans. And my mom was so convinced that I would become a clothing designer one day that she actually ended up framing one of my sketches. So this idea of starting a clothing company, I was so thrilled. So my roommate and I spent endless days in our dorm room, making all these sketches and designs and building out a business plan. And finally, 4 months later, we launched our clothing line at our first music festival and sold out our first line of hoodies. And this small idea that we had in our dorm room accidentally became a huge phenomenon. In our 3rd year, we had over 250 retailers worldwide carrying our clothing. We had a huge roster of celebrities wearing our clothing, and I had friends calling me from all around the world like, "Whoa, Sophia, I just saw someone on the street wearing your hoodie." What started as such a small idea really blew up. And over the years, we were treading through this and really making sure that we were growing out this idea. But as the years flew by, my co-founder and I realized that this really wasn't what we wanted anymore. This was a really weird thought for me to have, considering that this was a dream I had wanted for my whole existence, and I didn't know it was an okay thought for me to have, to say, I really have lived it and done it, and I've gone through this whole experience, but you know what, this is actually not for me. So my co-founder and I, we talked through it, and shortly after this realization, we ended up selling the company. So when this was all happening, I was still in college. You know, I was told my whole life that if you're good at something, you know, that's what you should do, that's the career you should take. So the fact that I just, you know, stepped back from this huge dream I had was kind of like a very shocking moment for me, and I was kind of ashamed of it. But I remember one day, you know, I went into this lecture that my professor was giving. I was still in college, I was like 21. And the professor that day was giving a lecture on how young people, how designers could actually save the world. He was telling us about how, you know, designers, if you use your business acumen and pair that to create something really impactful and innovative, you can actually save the planet, you can fight poverty. This talk, it completely cracked my head open. You know, there's something really powerful about someone telling you that your thoughts and your experiences actually matter for something. You know, that you're not just sitting in this classroom so that you can learn about all the great things other people did throughout history, but that you are actually capable of doing something too. So after that lecture, I made it my mission to really use my skills and my experiences to help the people and places that needed it most. So after that lecture, I spent a whole year studying, researching, writing about this. You know, how can we use our skills in design and business to really help solve the world's biggest problems? And I became obsessed with it. So when I graduated college, I did what I think anyone my age would do, and I went and got a corporate office job. But it was for a reason. Every single nonprofit I applied to rejected me. No one wanted me to work for them. And I really wanted so badly to step up for my ambitions of, you know, helping other people, but I just didn't see how it was possible. I really owned this job though. I made sure that I learned as much as I could. You know, I worked long hours and really made sure I built some actual skills in project management and solving different problems. And when the time was right, I left my job, and it was such an interesting moment because the day that I left my job and my coworkers and I were going out to celebrate my last day, I actually ended up meeting my co-founder for what would end up being Water Collective. It was such an incredible and strange, bizarre moment, but you know, it was as if the universe was telling me like, hey, you're in the right place, you're in the right time, this was the right decision you made. So Josh and I, a few months later, started building Water Collective, and we knew that we would be working in water, but we just didn't know where. You know, for a whole year, we had a bunch of false starts in Kenya, Uganda, and Burundi, and all of it fell through. And it wasn't until 2012 that we actually started a water project with a farming community in Cameroon. And from there, it was not smooth sailing. In Cameroon, the roads are complete mud for 6 months of the year, so it makes it really, really impossible to keep your project schedules on time. It's so hard to move any kind of project supplies. And on top of that, there's usually only one person that knows how to drive on these roads because it requires so much skill. And having to deal with that person's schedule made it further impossible. And then on top of all of this, we were dealing with all these different community conflicts and just political discord within the company. You know, just stuff that we were completely not prepared for. Josh and I knew that, you know, we were so passionate about providing people clean water, but we were trying so many different ideas and projects and, you know, trying to make it happen, and all these ideas weren't landing. You know, we were so confused why we weren't hitting the impact that we wanted to create. So none of this changed until we actually took some advice from a board member of ours. This board member sat us down and he said, listen, pick one thing and get really good at it. So that's what we did. We dove deep, we really focused on what defined us and what we valued. And one thing that really bothered us was the fact that 40% of water projects break after 2 to 5 years. Think about the thousands of people, the children that are affected by that, where they have water one day and it just disappears the next day and it never comes back again. So, this was such a stressful thought to us. If you've ever, donated online to a charity, or, let's say your friend has a fundraiser to bring clean water to a community, if you've donated to 10 of those in your lifetime, 4 of them don't work anymore. So we really spent a lot of time figuring out how can we fix this and why is this problem happening. So in 2014, what came out of this discovery was a program called Water Independence. Water Independence was a true reflection of what our partner communities wanted from their water. They didn't just want water that was here today, but they wanted water that would be here tomorrow and for their children's tomorrows and their grandchildren's tomorrows. So we really worked with our partner communities, figuring out how can we help you so that when our organization leaves, you know how to fix a broken pipe, you know how to replace a tap head if it doesn't work anymore. And this program became, this really fantastic thing where our partner communities were actually maintaining the water, operating the water by themselves so that broken wouldn't be a part of their definition anymore. And this program actually ended up being the golden addition to our organization that would launch it to where it is today. So my journey as entrepreneur probably seems like all over the place, but I think that's for a reason. I think that everyone's journey throughout their lives is not as tailored and packaged as they think it will turn out to be. My whole life, the one thing I always focus on is okay, whatever experience I'm going through, how will it serve me in my ultimate purpose? And I really believe that it led me to those situations and experiences where, for example, it also allowed me to learn these hard lessons, right? This corporate office job, I actually, cried every single week at that job. I hated it so much, but I think that was what I needed at the time. In a masochistic way, I needed something to make me so unhappy, to push me to pursue my ambitions and make it happen. So I think that, with a lot of the people in this room, from my understanding, a lot of you are probably, thinking about what's your major going to be, for when you go to college, or what is the next internship or the next job you're going to apply to. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of you are super, confused. You don't know where to start. You don't know where to go next with this decision, right? And I think that, what a lot of the people around us forget to tell us is that this decision is, when they're asking you to make this decision, they're not asking you to, write the whole book of what your life is going to be next, right? They're asking you to write the first chapter of this ultimate purpose you're creeping towards. If you talk to anyone who's worked for more than 10 years, they'll tell you that they actually started from a really, big pool, and they ended up somewhere different from where they started. So, for example, let's say that some of you want to work in the business world. So this is what will end up happening. You'll go to, a school where you'll learn everything that there is to know about business. And then, after the second or third year, you'll have to really focus in on a major. Let's say you decide on marketing. And then when you go out to the workforce, you'll have to pick something very specific, a very specific job in marketing. Let's say it's social media marketing. We all start from a large pool of possibilities, and we have so many opportunities in our lives to dig deep at every single step until you ultimately get to your ultimate purpose. I think you'll realize, or kind of gather from hearing my story, is that there isn't really anything exceptional about it. I'm not a genius. I didn't have a magical investor fall out of my sky and fund all of my ventures. The key turning points in my life were when I actually decided to make a decision and tell myself that I was going to focus and actually follow through with it, dive deep. I'm also willing to bet that a lot of you are scared of failing in whatever path you choose to take. There are so many points in my story where you could have called me a failure. Why did we decide to sell our clothing company? Because we didn't have the ambition to grow it anymore. Why did I end up at a corporate consulting job? Because I got rejected from every single nonprofit I applied to. Why did it take Water Collective so long to launch? Because we didn't manage our risk properly. What's important throughout all these failures was that I decided not to see them as failures. I framed them as turning points in my life. I told myself, hey, keep yourself focused, because even though like 2 years, 5 years are passing by, you'll eventually get to your ultimate purpose. You'll get to that last step. So consider this. If you had a friend running in a marathon, and if they didn't come first, would you call them a loser or a failure just because they didn't come first or second? You wouldn't. You would have the exact opposite reaction, because I personally would be so in awe that they trained for this, participating in something so physically challenging. They put in the same amount of work as a person who came first or second. They just came in at a different pace. We often frame our accomplishments only as accomplishments if we finish first, rather than giving ourselves credit for participating at all. This is the same way you need to look at your life's journey. It doesn't matter if you come first. You have to, give yourself credit for staying in, for actually going through, following through to the finish line, and training, putting in the hard work. And if you decide to take a water break or slow down your pace, that doesn't equate to failure. My whole life, I think that, this theme that I'm getting at is that you all have choices. We all have a full deck of cards that we have an opportunity to choose from, and you'll go through experiences, you'll have epiphanies, and you'll eventually start taking cards away from that deck. And that's going to be a decision that's completely yours. And then when you find that ultimate card that speaks to you, that's going to be the card that you're going to move forward with and just go straight to the finish line. One last thing that I want you all to remember as you're figuring out what's next for you is that your reality is not the same reality that your parents or your grandparents grew up in. Today, you're living in a world that's in a lot of ways has taken a huge step backwards. Before, saving the world meant becoming a doctor or joining the army to defend your country. But that definition today has expanded exponentially. Today, saving the world means protecting people from gun violence, racism, terrorism, cyber terrorism. The list goes on and on. The world is really hurting right now, and we need people to step up to help change its course. And with social media and all this access to information right now, millennials are so connected to the rest of the world. You have access to video, you share posts with each other about what's going on with the Syrian refugee crisis, what's going on with epidemics like Ebola. Millennials are unknowingly giving each other a daily education on what it's like to fight different epidemics and crises that are going in the world. You're getting a very slow but really good, rich daily education. And you ever have access, with this information, you all have access to all this information that, like, when I was growing up, it took me months and research. As I was telling you before, I was constantly researching to figure out where I wanted to go next. But today, you guys have all that information right under your fingertips. So for example, if you really want to know how many broken water projects there are in Kenya, you can go on Twitter and ask someone. If you want to know what being a refugee truly is like for a person, you can watch someone live stream their day. You are all uniquely qualified to change the world because you grew up connected to far corners of the world. you are all, have all access to all this information that allows you to empathize. You are living these people's shoes and these firsthand accounts. And you are educated so much in repairing our worlds right now, and you don't even know it. So in this world, where we feel like all this violence and hate is getting louder and louder, in order for us to change that, we need a larger collective group of young people stepping up, committing their hearts and minds to making a change. And, innovators who are really, would be great entrepreneurs, we need you to step up to think of new ideas to curb violence and hate. It's only when this happens that we're going to see a monumental shift in all this hate that's happening right now and see a true transformation. All the social entrepreneurs my age, we put in our best ideas to leave a positive impact in the world, but our legacy is being threatened. The amount of violence and hate is up here, and the amount of people working to fix it and attack it, it's getting lower and lower, and this is getting higher and higher. We need younger millennials to continue writing the next chapters of the legacy that we're leaving on this world. So I want you to remember that as you're figuring out what's next for you, remember that you're already qualified for one job. You can leave a positive impact on our worlds. And remember that you have a full deck of cards that you're capable of choosing from, and whatever card you choose, remember that that's a decision that's completely yours. And when you figure out that one card that speaks to you and your ultimate purpose, pursue it relentlessly, and don't be so hard on yourself if you don't finish first. A marathon is long for a reason. Thank you. So yeah, I really wanted to take this time to take any questions if there were any. Yeah. I'm sorry, is there like a mic or could speak a little louder? Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, sanitation is a huge problem as well. And so we focus specifically on clean water and even more specifically on fixing broken water projects because, at the base of any problem in the developing world that has to do with economic development, it all stems from water. Like you can't get electricity if you don't have water because the people providing, building electric poles in the village don't have water to drink. If you want to improve the education in your village, if the children don't have water to drink that's healthy, then they won't be in class all the time because they'll be constantly sick, and et cetera, et cetera. So we saw that water was at the foundational base of this, and we focused even more specifically into broken water projects because we were kind of like, what's the point of investing all this clean water if almost half of your investments are all null, like they don't work anymore. So we focused specifically on that because we felt that it was like this fundamental core. And with sanitation, of course, sanitation and water go so hand in hand where sanitation efforts, it can only go so far. Because, with waterborne diseases, I know that like clean water and sanitation are exactly hand in hand. People tend to think like clean water is more important than sanitation, but it's actually not. You actually need both sanitation and clean water to drastically reduce how sick people get from their water. So for us, it was kind of like, we know that we want to help people become healthier and actually have water that they can rely on, but at the same time, we can't do everything because, the moment that you figure out like, oh, I'm gonna do water, I'm gonna do sanitation, because that's the full solution to this crisis, we decided to pick that one slice of the pie that we both knew that we were very skilled at. So that was a part of it too, was our co-founders' personalities and understanding that we were really good at solving problems and solutionizing and ideating over different challenges. So yeah, that was kind of why we decided to focus that way. Thank you for your question. Any other questions?
What was your most memorable experience when you traveled to the other countries? Do you have like a special story about them?
I have several. I'll give you two. So one related to, working in these communities. It's been really great because a lot of these communities really don't have anything, but they're just so joyful and have so much gratitude. And I think that as someone who grew up in the first world, that's really eye-opening to see, and it's like a great moment of reflection for yourself. Like, why was I mad that my subway was late? Or why was I mad that like my drink didn't come out 5 minutes earlier? Like, it just provides so much perspective. And it's just been like another memorable moment is just like, there are moments where, for example, like I have to walk 7 miles in the rainforest because we're working with an engineer to figure out like some aspect of the water system that's broken. And there's this like one night where I had to walk in the rainforest. There's no light, so it's like complete pitch black. And just like talking with a friend of mine about like the cultural differences between love and the US and Cameroon, like that was so interesting to me. Like their concept of love is so much grander and bigger than our concept of love. So just like having these like cultural connections between each other, it's been really enriching for me to be a part of. So those are probably my two favorite moments. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Hearing your story, I was really, really impressed about how just in college, you were already an entrepreneur, doing your own thing. Because I remember when I was in college, it was more like focusing on myself. Mm-hmm. So seeing how you're already thinking outside of the box and trying to make something out of your ideas is very, very impressive. And then hearing that after you found that this business you started up, you wanted to move on from that and you want to try something else. And then you made this whole water collect nonprofit. It's really amazing. And so now, I guess I'm curious in terms of your mind, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like how is your train of thought, like direction? Where do you see progressive?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like that was a hard lesson for me growing up, is that no one ever tells you that you evolve as a human being. Like I think that like with a lot of our parents, for the most of us, ever since we were younger, we've only seen our parents like have one job. Like I would probably say like for the majority of my friends at least, like we have never seen our parents switch careers. And I think that like for our generation, I think the definition of what work is and really being comfortable with like going with the flow of your interest rather than saying that like this is my job and I'm gonna hold it for life. Like I think that's changing a lot, and I think that like for me that at first was such a hard thing to come in terms with. So after that clothing company, you know, it was almost as if like I couldn't bear it anymore. Like even though I loved it and it was such a beautiful chapter of my life, you know, working at my clean water nonprofit and building it was like really what's next for me. So, you know, right now, like our water organization has been around for 5.5 years and we have a team of 6 people in Cameroon. So like that's kind of what's next for me is like I built this organization that I really love and our on-ground staff can actually manage it, and I'm personally moving into more working with social entrepreneurs and helping them build their startups, because that's another thing I realized. So I'm like in the second chapter of my life and I realized like, hey, I really love helping other people build their startups. How can I do that for the next chapter? So yeah, that's kind of like where my next 5 to 10 years looks like, is helping other people like, okay, I've accumulated 10 years of experience now. I want to help other people create beautiful, like really impactful ideas. So that's kind of my next step. And I don't know how, you know, your parents or anyone older than you will feel about me saying this, but I really hope you all pursue that, just like being comfortable with the fact that like you're going to evolve as a human being and your ideas of what job is good for you is going to be evolve as well. And I find that my friends and the people that are happiest are the ones that really answer that calling. Like if your calling like differs every 5 to 10 years, then like follow it, because you never know, like your end point might be like what you were ultimately looking for, right? So I would say like really honor that. Thank you for your question.
So 50% of water project NGOs fail due to lack of community organization. So how does Water Collective like interact differently, and like, how did it become so successful in its execution?
So the moment that things shifted for us was when we knew that we had to listen to the communities that we were working with from the start. Like we always knew that, but we didn't dive deep into that until like the second or third year. We really thought about like, how can we really listen to people and follow through on what they asked from us? So what happened was that we ended up hiring 6 people on our on-ground staff. So we have people in Cameroon that are part of our team, and they go visit our partner communities every single week. And these are people who, you know, either have aunts or uncles or family in these villages. So, you know, our partner communities like really view our on-ground staff as like part of their community as well and their family. So, you know, building those like strong kinship and those bonds of like, this isn't a water project by like some American NGO. This is actually a water project that's like been grown within your country and within your community, and it's completely yours. So, you know, our community aspect of our organization is really intense. Like, so whenever a water project is finished being built, we actually stay with the community for 2 to 3 years, where we're actually acting as like customer support. We're in the community with them, you know, we're answering questions they have about like, okay, like this part of the system is clogged, like how do we unclog it? And we actually like talk them through like, okay, this is how you would troubleshoot it. So like, if you ever get a manual for like your iPhone or your computer and you're like trying to figure out how to work it, like we actually act as your manual like in person. So like our community support has been really intense, and that fact, the statistic you just gave is like completely accurate. Like the moment that we stop doing that kind of stuff where we're like in the community with people and like really giving that support, that's the moment our projects just like don't do well. And so yeah, it's really important, and I've seen it myself, like you absolutely need to be intense about your community support in order for your projects to do well. Thank you for your question.
Hello. So my question is, you spoke about your failures, which I thought was really interesting. And you also talked about, starting your own business and the failures, and also you found your passion doing Water Collective. And also you were very honest, I felt like, when you said that it took a long time, a while for it to get going and to figure out what you were really good at. And what I also found interesting was that you were able to listen to another member of your board and what they wanted to, and the advice they gave. So as you venture into the next project, the next stage of the things you want to accomplish, how important were those, what is your mindset that you want to give to the startup entrepreneur that's not there yet, that's not established yet? How important is the mindset that that person has to have in order for them to overcome, the difficulties that lie ahead?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And another thing I want to point out is that, like, even though I've been doing this for such a long time, like, I'm still learning. Like, for example, after I finish work, I actually go to grad school classes at night. I'm actually working with a business coach right now. Like, I think that's one thing you need to, like, also be honest with yourself, is that you're never gonna stop learning. It doesn't matter how much of an expert you are. It doesn't matter if you're on top of the world. Like, in order for you to be extremely strong leader and be at the top, you actually have to continuously learn. And I think that, like, mindset is actually, like, what I see make or break entrepreneurs. Just like adopting, even if it's like not something that you're used to, like, for example, always like pushing yourself and always being confident in yourself, even though that's not, ingrained in you, you can fake that. And I think that, like, understanding that mindset, it's not just some woo-woo stuff where you, like, read books and you're like, yeah, like, pump myself up, listen to some cool music and, like, get pumped for myself. Like, it's actually, like, a very physical and very important thing to have, is, like, practicing, different, whether it's affirmations or stories that you read online to really help you build your confidence. Like, do that and really understand that that's a practice. Understand that that's homework for you, because if you're not confident, if you, fall down at any moment of a challenge, like, that's gonna break you as much as, like, having an idea that doesn't work. So yeah, mindset is so fundamental. It's such an important foundational skill that you need to grow, and people, for whatever reason, don't put much importance on it. So yeah, definitely, like, mindset of, like, understanding that you're always going to hit challenges and being prepared for that. And even when, like, on a day-to-day, let's say, like, you are starting a new idea and you're not getting, like, the amount of funding that you want, you're not getting, that project off the ground that you want. And on a day-to-day, that's, like, such a struggle in your mind, because you're kind of like, it's not happening today, like, I'm such a failure. But that doesn't mean that it won't happen a month from now or, like, next week. So I think, like, just being strong and, like, holding steady within the day-to-day is such a skill as well. So yeah, mindset is so important. Practice it as much as you can. Thank you for your question.
My question is, in your life, like, what inspired you to do this, and what was your most difficulty, and how did you solve it?
I think that my inspiration in life, I think that, like, I always kind of, like, had, like, for example, when I was in high school, I dreamt of the day that I would graduate and get out of there. Like, there was nothing I wanted more in my life, and I think that I always had this, like, burning desire of doing something that was so much bigger than myself. So I think that always guided me in a way, whether it was through, like, the clothing company or through Water Collective. It didn't matter what that looked like. It just mattered that, like, I was doing something bigger than me. So I think that, like, has always been something that has led me. Maybe it was also because like I grew up in the suburbs and I was so bored that this thought of, you know, working was such an amazing idea. Like who says that? Who says that they want to work and it's like sounds so exciting, but that was how bored I was when I was growing up. So I think that had to do with it. And what was your second question? Your second question was, what was my biggest challenge? Oh gosh, I've had so many, but I think that like, just like when you work in a place like Sub-Saharan Africa, you're dealing with challenges that are so much bigger than yourself, where you're really questioning like, why did I get into this job? Like these moments of like, you don't know why you picked this job because the problems are so much bigger than you. I think like that's always a big challenge. Like, you know, for example, in our third year as an organization, like one of our employees passed away and he was only 24 years old. And that for me was kind of like, why am I doing this job? Like this insane thing just happened to us where someone passed away on our team. Like, you know, these moments of like not understanding why it's happening to you and what are you supposed to do next. So I think, yeah, just like real heavy, real life challenges, like that has always been like the most hardest moments where no one gives you a guidebook to tell you what you're supposed to do next and you kind of have to figure out yourself. So yeah, thank you.
After all the challenges you went through and all the difficulties you had to overcome.
So could you talk louder?
After all the challenges you went to and all the difficulties you had to overcome, would you go back and do it all over again?
Yes, I would. I would do it all over again. Just because I don't think that you grow as a person and you're actually not capable of doing anything, any job, whether it's a new job or a new career, like you're not able to do anything unless you go through the bad moments as well. It's so essential to the DNA of like who you're going to become and your future career, or like just like what kind of person you want to be. You know, if you want to be a kind, good person who, you know, always makes the right decisions, you kind of have to go through the hard moments in order to figure that out. I mean, like same thing like with this office job that I used to have, like I really didn't like it, and every single day was a struggle to get out of bed and actually go to work because, you know, I just didn't know why I was working at a corporate office job when I wanted to work at a mission-driven organization. So yeah, but despite that, I would totally do it again because actually, like, I wouldn't have the project management skills because we eventually figured out how to get our project materials in those like really deep trenched out roads. Like we figured out how to get over that because I had such intense project management problem solving skills that allowed me to like put myself step by step towards a solution. So yeah, I think challenges are incredibly important. Thank you for your question.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. Today's lecture. And actually, it was my first time to learn some through the student question. 50% of water project failed, and I did not know that fact. I just learned about it. And regarding that question, you explained about community support, and that was very interesting too. Because how I thought was most of NGO project might fail because of a lack of a budget. That was my presumption. However, you didn't mention about anything about finance, and you more focusing on community support. So that part really attracted my attention, and it was very interesting. And if I understand correctly, that community support means community support from the local where you try to implement your project. And if my understanding correct, I would like to understand how you create that community support and the connection to the local community, and also how much is important to determine the success and failure of the project.
So your question is how did we create the community support aspect of our project? Okay, so we actually created that. So I come from a design strategy background. Like I did my undergrad degree in design strategy and graduated with a business degree. And the concept behind design strategy is that you never assume anything. When you create a product, you never assume that, just because someone wants a phone, they want a phone that also texts. You don't assume any of that. You discover your solution by watching your customer and seeing how they interact with your product. And you create your solution based off of actual validated data, by validated observations, saying like, no, I've seen my customer use my product that way, therefore this is how we should create our solution as well. So we actually created our customer support community program based off what we were seeing. We actually spent about 2 years observing our partner communities and how they actually learned information. So we studied a lot so for example, in Cameroon, all the rural communities, more or less, they do cocoa farming. And we tried to learn okay, how do they teach each other cocoa farming? Because the father will usually teach their son and the son would teach their son. And we wanted to figure out how do they retain information and how do they learn this skill that they know how to do every single day and they're so skilled at it that they can make money off of it. So we figured out that actually the way that they learn all this new information is by word of mouth. There is never any written word or written paper about learning these new skills. So that's what we actually ended up doing. We ended up teaching our partner communities water maintenance by written word, by in-person interaction. And another thing we were realizing was that people learn information through repetition and retention. So we actually repeat a lot of the information that we give to our partner communities over and over and over again, and then we actually test them to make sure that they retain the information. So we grabbed that from cocoa farming. We didn't create that. We grabbed that from understanding this is the way people learn already, and let's learn from that and duplicate that for our programs. Thank you for your question.
Okay, last question, if there's any other questions. This will be the last question. Final question.
I would like to know, for someone with a different background, how do we get to if I want to start my own startup, how do I get to make a business plan without someone stealing the idea? Yes.
Great question. Okay, so the advice I give anyone who's starting a new idea and they don't have a business background is this. Understand what your personality is. So for example, if you love talking to people and you love meeting new people, make sure your startup reflects that. So for example, if you are starting a social enterprise and let's say you sell glasses and every glasses purchase, it gives back to someone in the developing country that needs glasses, which is the model of Warby Parker. So let's say you wanted to start something like that. Does it make sense for you to start something like that if you love meeting people and hanging out with people and going to conferences and learning new things? It's such a misfit with your personality, right? Because someone who's gonna start a startup selling glasses, they need to be in the office, they need to build a sales model, they need to call people and build relationships. Remember that when you're starting your startup, what's gonna be innovative about it is your personality. So make sure that whatever you start up, make sure that if you're an outgoing person and you love talking to people, make sure your startup reflects that. Do something that even though you have a specific mission in mind, it doesn't mean that you can't edit it to fit your personality. Talk about how eyesight is so important at conferences. Go to networking events and talk about it and make that your organization. And then when it comes to the business plan, really tap into the people that are around you. Know that you're not going to be able to do anything and be honest with yourself about that, There's so many resources nowadays for young people. I wish I had this when I was growing up. there's so many resources now for people to just grab a business plan format online, and you could just like write it according to, have like a friend that's really good with numbers or business, like look it over your business plan for you, you know? And never be scared of asking, you know, people who you admire. You know, you can find all these people on the internet now, people you admire and you look up to, and say like, hey, like, I have this business idea, and ask them a specific question that you want them to answer about your business idea, because, you know, we're all busy. We can't all sit down and like have coffee and hear your whole idea, but what we can do is commit 5 minutes of our day to answer a specific question you have. So yeah, like just understand that your idea is not like, it doesn't have to be purely within yourself. Like, understand you have people around you who can support you, and don't be scared to reach out to the people you admire, because if you have a specific question, they're gonna help you. I mean, I do. If someone ever has a specific question for me, I always answer them. I'm not like, when someone says like, hey, I love what you do, can we get coffee and this and that, I'm kind of like, I have so much to do, I can't, but can you please ask me a specific question, and I'd love to answer it. So yeah, I think that like whatever you do, like just understand your personality, make your startup fit, and as far as like the business plan and the financials, like that's all gonna come into formation like a breeze. Yeah. Thank you for your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.